guys, I'm talking random even with the computer on, because this is lectures actually just for you, but people watching out there can also watch, but they might not understand it. But the lecture today is about grunge, because I've said to you in the beginning, there's the classical style, there's the grunge style, and there's the pop art. The key thing about grunge, if you've got to talk about grunge, grunge is all about emotion, energy. It's almost like if it doesn't grab you emotionally, or then it's not grunge. It's like you're unsure what it is, but you know it's different. So I like to refer to grunge as alternative. People that's non-conforming. You know, we're all in society, we conform. Then somebody comes up and then they just don't conform. Now, grunge music started with music, right? And it started really in the early 90s, late 80s, where they combined heavy metal with punk rock. So punk rock is really, I don't know much about music, but punk rock as I know it, and I'm just giving you the broad outline as I know it, really started in the UK. And the punk rockers were always against establishment. They will talk about this and the dark side, anything that's dark or angry or rebellious. They're against everything, you know. They're alternative. They don't like to conform. Okay? And creative people don't like to conform. Anyway, so if you take now grunge music, the band that really put grunge music right up there is who? Nirvana. Now, have you ever heard Nirvana? His lyrics is very dark, controversial. You can't understand it. When he performs, it's dark. The place is dark. It's not something that you think of a big rock concert with. If you think of Madonna or you think of Michael Jackson, oh, the millions of people, the band is clear, the lighting is good, the sound effects is excellent, the dance moves are out of this world. Grunge music, they play in these dark clubs. The equipment that they use is old speakers, not even quality speakers, but they've got a message. They're connecting with their audience, the young people. They are just as rebellious and they are connecting with the audience, and they have got their own little grunge club, so to speak. And then the movement grows as more of the young people of that generation likes Nirvana, and he then suddenly gets elevated because people are taking notice. It's exactly the same as the Beatles. Not the Beatles, yeah, the Beatles or rock music. Remember when Elvis Presley first came out and he did the rock, they were all, the type of music was very danceical and tap dancing and very nice music, and he comes with this like beat. So when you are now Elvis in these days was radical. Now after a while it's not radical anymore. After a while grunge is not radical anymore. And when Nirvana died out, you still get grunge music still today, but it's not so popular as say another genre. So you get these evolutions where things go into periods, and then it makes an impact in the period. Now David Carson is still alive today, and he does many lectures and he travels of the world, and he can choose and pick his clients and his conversations, and it's fantastic. I wish I could be like that, but on a small scale you could. It just he happens to have connected with that grunge people. So why did he suddenly become famous? Because David Carson also didn't like the rules of classical design, like I've mentioned. David Carson liked something that's a bit rebellious, that appeals to him. He doesn't want to do something that doesn't appeal to him. So what he did was, he was a surfer. And when the opportunity came to do a surfing magazine, he designed the surfing magazine. And he decided he'll do it just the way he wants it. If he wants the text upside down, he'll put it upside down. If he wants the picture upside down, he'll do it upside down. And his audience, the surfers, didn't mind it if it was like that. His audience didn't mind. Because why? They were extremists. You know that surfing is a bit of an extreme sport. You ride those waves. These guys are on adrenaline, energy. They like things to be not normal. You know what I'm saying? Unconformed. They come there with their broken jeans. Nirvana was being on stage with t-shirts and broken rag jeans and equipment doesn't work. But when he became famous, now suddenly all the girls in the malls want to have cut-off jeans. All smart, but there's my little cut. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they popularize everything. But he started it. It was his way, I think. So he comes up with these crazy lyrics and everything. But if you listen to it and you put him into context, then you can see what he was trying to say because of the way he was living, his personal life. And now all of his personal life and the way he was living was just being broadcast out there for the whole world to see. And then he got criticized. People still criticize grunge today. You won't find, in classic, you won't find grunge. You've got to really tweak the grunge if you're going to do it. Because people are thinking of their brand. And they want to build their brand. And then they want this little, now this Carson is famous. I want to bring a bit of Carson in. So when Carson then has to design for Nike, which he has, he's got to tone down his heavy grunge to be more acceptable. It's a give and take. It's like two relationships. When you're in a relationship, there's a give and take. So you're still trying to bring out your side, but there's a give and take. So the thing about grunge and grunge music when it started is David Carson was lucky because the people in the surfing magazine didn't mind it looking like that, the way he designed it. Because they were extreme themselves. Then he hit the luck because then he started working, doing the layout for a magazine called what? What was the name of the magazine? Ray Gun. Right. Now, nobody's heard of Ray Gun, but have you all heard of Rolling Stone magazine? So everybody, the whole world knows about Rolling Stone magazine, which is a magazine for musicians. And if that musician can say, I was in Rolling Stone, wow! And if the article is there about the musician and everything is said about the musician, and it's just great, because it's Rolling Stone. But yet Ray Gun was also a magazine, but it was for this alternative grunge music, and the people that go on stage and like heavy metal and punk music and whatever it goes with. And they don't want to be boring. So his photographs were out of focus, sometimes cut off. Text would just put text there because it had the nice grunge feel. It wasn't it wasn't all neat and they didn't mind it. To give you one extreme example, Carson imposed his graphic design on the magazine and they accepted it. If you can impose your style and the person can accept it, as long as you can reason it out and tell me why, then if your audience agrees to it, then and it makes sense, they decide whether you run with it or not. So in other words, it's also the audience that plays a big part in your success, as opposed to the few critics or the people up there. So just to give you this one example, which I thought was classic, I even did it myself. So David Carson, we know you want fonts, types, and you want images. So the images is grainy, out of focus, blurred, whatever. The focal point is not in the center, sometimes it's at the bottom, sometimes it's cut out of the picture. But he once had to do a layout for an article by a musician, I forget the musician's name, but when he got the text of the article, of the interview, and he had to lay it out on the magazine spread, he got the picture of the guy. He thought it was boring. I think it was Brian Ferry, Roxy Music or something. They sent the article, the picture and everything, and he didn't like it. So what he did was, he took the article, and instead of choosing the fonts, and instead of putting the picture big, he put the picture small, blurred, small in the top right hand corner, and he just put one big massive texture piece on the one side of the page, and on the other side of the page where the article comes, he put in the article, and he had to choose a font. And guess what font he used? He used something like Wingdings. You know Wingdings? It's not a font. It's you can take you guys know, if you take a whole article and you put the font Wingdings, you're just going to get these little symbols. So he thought this was such a boring article, I'm going to put Wingdings. And the people page, you can't read this thing. It's Wingdings, I can't read this article. So there's a little note in the corner. If you want to read the article, we'll supply you with the article, and you can choose your own font and read it. Because as soon as you change the font, you can read the article. Yeah. So if you're really interested in reading the article, just change the font. We'll give, with the magazine, we'll supply you the little clip, the CD, whatever, and you can change the font and read it if you're interested. Now, obviously, Brian Ferry wasn't happy with that, eh? But who was this article for? To put Brian Ferry up there as a god, or to communicate with the audience? So if the audience thinks the layout artist that read the article doesn't find it interesting, then I'm also not going to find it interesting. He's in connect with his audience. He's just as rebellious as them. He's just as alternative as them. And that's why they like him. Why? Because he's one of them. You know what I'm saying? And then the Ray Gun magazine just grew and grew and grew. But there was design principles that he stuck to. Because he was a graphic designer. And you'll notice that when you see the magazine, he's not going to hide the word Ray Gun. He might put it in a different font. He might put it in a different format. But it will stand out immediately. And then there will be this energy and this texture. And this texture and energy, or this unreadability, so to speak, I'm going to just give it a few names. Where it's not just pure texture. It's texture in the fonts, and it's texture in the images and the way the images are created. So when you're going to do as a project, your grunge project, we're going to start off with text first. And you've got to bear in mind the texture. But I want you to start off with the text first. So I want you to, I'm putting here a few words. There's got to be a grittiness to the texture, or to the fonts, or to the it's almost like, Carson was also famous for his collages, where he will paste something on top of each other and tear it off with a piece of tape, and take the picture of how he makes the tear and puts the collage on top of the other one. Then you can see the tear. So everything is not necessarily done on the computer. You know, with Photoshop, you can make a tear look like a tear. But he would physically make a tear and then take a photograph of it. His photographs, he would actually take a photograph, fold the photograph, and then take a picture of the photograph and put it in the magazine. So there's folds in the photograph, just to show that this was actually first a real photograph before I scanned it in or placed it on there. Nobody gave it to me digitally. They gave me a physical photo. So he's very rebellious but he did it for himself, and now people are taking to it. But pretty much, there was only a few grunge artists, but what made him famous is because Nirvana became famous, and most of the music of that grunge generation was depicted in Ray Gun, and Carson designed Ray Gun, and people liked the design. I can remember when I saw grunge, Carson's designs for the first time, I loved it. I still do. I'm a big fan of David Carson. Is there any of you that don't like his work? Do you think it looks good? Or even though you don't understand it? You feel it sort of touches you in a way. You don't understand it, but it's crazy. Huh?
Yeah, it's crazy. But
yeah.
I don't, there's something about it
that's nice.
Yeah.
You see, so it's each one's personal. So a work of art does, as long as it communicates, and that is why the first lecture that I wanted you to have a look at, that symbol that he got famous for, was don't mistake legibility for communication. And he wrote it in such a funny way that when you look at it, you can't first understand what is written there. It's a few words, but if you sit with it longer and longer, you realize it says, don't mistake legibility for communication. So he makes you stare at for a while before you understand it. So, but in today's branding and classic, immediately you must be able to see, legible, yes, this is the message, this is what I'm going to do. I'm getting an action, this is the color, I'm not confused that this is Coca-Cola. Yes, that's Coca-Cola. You know, you're not confused. But he doesn't mind you staying longer with it because it depends on the audience, the grunge audience. Now you can, when he became famous, in that same video clip I asked you to look at, did you see that image of Nike with the shoe and how he changed the wording a bit skew? So there was some grunge in it, but it was just toned down a bit. Okay? So in other words, he never believed in leading spacing being the one on top of the other one, equal leading spacing. He could bring the spacing close. He could mix and match fonts. And you know in graphic design, you don't mix and match fonts and things like that. Okay, so there's a lot of grittiness about it. The textures, there's a lot of earthiness about it. And there's a lot of, what is the type of words we can describe the texture part of it?
Raw.
It's raw. It's very raw. The patterns, the textures is raw. It's cut.
Energetic.
It's energetic. The feel, the emotional feel is energetic.
There's movement.
There's energy. There's movement. There's emotion. You feel something because you got to understand it initially when you look at it. Okay, so. You don't have your cell phones here, but I'll forward it to you. So I thought to myself, okay, if this is the first project, we're going to start off with the text and turn it into some type of grunge feel. I've done it as well. So here's my, but I will still give you a brief on it. But this is my contribution to grunge. I hope I find it. Yeah. So this is the David Carson one, where he eventually became famous and he had to conform to Nike. So look at the text and the balance of the text. And Nike would put the logo at the bottom and it would be equally red, right? So Nike approved it. And it's got his stamp on it, or his personality on it. So it's a very big plus for him. And to be endorsed by Nike to be able to do something like that. If anybody else had done that, Nike would have kicked it off. No, it's bad. The art director would say, no, you can't do that. So that's how he was able to, because of the time. So stick to what you believe in. And in time, people will either accept it or they don't accept it. It's up to them. But don't lose your individuality by always conforming. Artists don't really always conform. They like to have their individualism. And I like that as well. Yeah, your own stamp. So I've done this one. This is my own. And it doesn't matter how long you took it. It's just, I just tried to get the key things. So the key things that I picked up from that, I quickly put it into this design. And the design is called Lorem Ipsum. That's what the design is called. Let's show it for the camera as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so you all agree that's text, right? It's there to communicate. What's it saying to you? Lorem Ipsum, blah, 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 blah.
It's like a
Gibberish. Lorem Ipsum is gibberish text that people use. It's in Photoshop. You can copy paste it. It's just for your placement of your text. Now, I've elevated Lorem Ipsum into status. It was just meant to be placing your text so that you can replace it with your text. So why? Why not make Lorem Ipsum the hero? Okay? And now, design-wise, does it work? Right. Okay. And I like that little detail that I did there with doing it in reverse and then taking it with the M and turning the M into an L. That's my little graphic design genius that I've put in there that I can talk to you about. And to especially put that's big, but that's also Lorem Ipsum. But that is small, but that's clearly Lorem Ipsum. So it's reversed. It's the only text there that's reversed. So I I can give you context of why I chose it like that. And why is it grunge? Because it's skew. And notice that why is it also grunge? Because the top line is blurred. I also use David Carson's blurring, but instead of blurring a picture, I blurred my text on top. Okay? So you can bring in a grunge style in anything that you want. But I'm doing it now purely for the sense of describing to you what grunge is in terms of text. Because I first want you to go and do grunge as text, and do a bit of research on grunge and text, and then once you've done it completely emotionally and energetically and as grunge, we can then turn that into normal, classical, good art like the Nike one, where it's readable and yet different. You with me? And then we will decide what is good and what is not good amongst ourselves, and we will post it. And then if somebody says, oh, but your leading spaces is wrong, or you're mixing your fonts, we say it's not important, because it's a grunge style. Didn't you notice it was a grunge style? What is grunge? You see, we rely on experience of grunge and pop art to help mold us how we want to put our own style onto a graphic design piece. Okay, otherwise, how many of you walk through the malls and you find everything is boring? Okay, and I want you to do boring, because boring is good communication, but you can still make it look slightly different. But you first start off with boring, and then you tweak it to be creative. You can't just start off with creativity first for a brand or for a person that's going to pay you. So you've got to start off with. So, just to give you an example, so me and Colin does websites. When we did the first website, we stuck to the templates of what we were given in Elementor. And we looked at other websites, and we looked at the templates we had, and in time, it took us 6 months, 8 months, we developed our own style. Now, if you look at our websites, we've got our own style of websites doing, and we think it looks better than other websites. And we are improving it and changing our styles as we develop. And when we look at other sites and, oh, that they used was interesting, why didn't they? And we can start questioning it down. But in the beginning, when we started off, we start off with templates. You start off with classical. You start just by producing what is classical. And then you develop into changing it and adding your own style to it. So the first thing I want you to do is, I want you to stick to the classical style and to the grunge or to whatever in my classes. But when you do your designs, you will go according to the brief, whatever brief Tracy gives you and whatever. So my briefs are separate to Tracy's briefs. Okay? But you take all the learning from both ends and you apply it. Okay? So you have to get involved with your design. You can't just wait for Tracy to brief and me to brief, because then you are like a worker in a graphic design shop where you're getting paid and where it's boring. But it's when you start saying, okay, I'm doing this design. Why? I'm going to do it classical first, and then I'm going to change. And then I'm going to do something different. And then I'm going to put it on it. But everything you will find does start off by working within a brief. So there are certain parameters you can't go out of. And once you know what your parameters are, you try to bend the rules within your parameters. And sometimes the people don't spell out the brief good enough. But if you've understood the brief, what they've wanted, and you work within that brief, and then you start breaking the rules within the briefs by giving them alternatives, you'll be surprised how people will rather go for your alternative because it's still stuck with the brief. Okay? So we're going to start off. Oh yes, and here's the David Carson thing that made him famous. Don't mistake legibility for communication. Okay, and the way you read it is you start with don't mistake legibility for communication. Okay, guys, I'm gonna end off with that. So to understand grunge, the key thing about grunge, if I'm just gonna have to look at it very key, you're gonna have to look for this grittiness, this earthiness, this texture. And most of this texture, it's almost like, when you talk, it's almost like a rustiness. Metal that's rusty because it's eaten away. wood that is not nice wood, but like painted over and paints that flakes off it. It's got this texturally feel to it, or a shirt that is torn or dirty or something. And most of the pictures tend to be very dark, or angle is upside down or cut out or raw. So this is what you want to start seeing. So the key thing is the texture part, and then the other thing is the misplacement of the layout. Things come in from the side, the focal point is at the bottom, but when you look at it, the key thing that David Carson uses is space. Now we don't talk about space, we talk about background. Remember background? Background is when you've got a layout and you're putting something in there, this around it is your background. And David Carson just doesn't fill up everything. Even if he fills up everything, you will still see there's breathing space amongst his elements. You will always notice that even though it's crowded, things are polarizing, or there's a breathing space between elements. Okay, thanks guys for attending, and I will give you the brief on the text part. Okay, thanks. That's it.
Bravo.
Okay, cool. Can you put it on?